Hi, this is 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and you're watching The Shift Asia.
Hi, and I'm Serene.
And we're talking about the ESG Institute. It's a Singapore-based organization which is dedicated to accelerating the sustainability transition of businesses. They work with companies to simplify complex sustainability standards and implement effective ESG strategies, providing training, consulting services, and a global community of sustainability professionals.
So their flagship book, Greensight, Sustainability Guide for Company Directors, it's designed to help leaders, board members, and C-suite executives navigate the sustainability landscape, offering actionable guides and advice.
I'm here with Joanne Flinn, the chairperson of the ESG Institute and author of Greensight. She's an international speaker and award-winning author, advising boards on sustainability, appearing in several TEDx events. Hello, Joanne, out in Singapore.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here with you virtually.
Right. Now, we'll talk about your journey as an individual, right? What sparked your interest in sustainability? How does your personal journey influence your approach to cracking the ESG, the very complex ESG code?
Well, actually, you could say I was born into sustainability. I ran my first $10 million business at 23, where I had to work out how to cover $1 million of unfunded debt. So that was very much, like a hard entry into the business sustainability, the commercial side of sustainability. But the cracking the ESG code, actually where this comes from is it's thanks to my mother and father. My mother was an editor and communicator in sustainability back in the days when it was called the Green Revolution. And my dad was a senior scientist who used to take great science from the top scientists in the world and take it out into the real world to see if it actually delivered real value. And he did it with the most pragmatic business people ever, smallholder farmers in Asia.
Right.
So he literally would take things and go out to, farmers in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Pakistan, a country near the Afghan border, in different countries of Africa. And the core thing he was looking for was, for the farms, was it actually going to make them more money so they'd be financially sustainable? Not just now, but over years. So, it had to actually make economic sense.
Right.
And then it was like, would this actually feed the family and pay the workers so they could look after the people that they cared for in their community? So, it had to make social sense as well. And then in doing what they did, the farm, would it continue to yield crops over the years so that the farmer and their children would have a future? So what these days we'd call, does it make environmental sense?
Right.
So this was my day-to-day childhood with the top scientists of the world coming over for dinner with my ears open. I learned all about systems and consequences. So, for me, I had this wonderful upbringing where I had people, planet, and profit all kind of coming together as one.
I see. And I know you're part of the ESG Institute, right? And could you maybe detail to us, why was it founded and what does it aim to achieve? And specifically, maybe, how do you see it help leaders in the region navigate the sustainability landscape?
Okay, lovely question. So the ESG Institute was founded to help business leaders here in Asia practically and profitably accelerate their transition to a cooler, greener future. The world that science, we call it under 1.5 degree world, that the big international countries are calling the Paris Agreement. And fundamentally it's so that you and I and the listeners and their families have a better world. So, that's the really big picture view.
Right.
So we work with business leaders because we believe business leaders are a powerful force for change. And to us, success is the long-term game of businesses thriving, people thriving, and the planet thriving. This year, next year, 2030, 2050. So, which at one level can seem super theoretical. So I've got a question for you. Let's make it personal. Right. Do you want to be alive in 25 years?
Of course.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, me too. Because I was finding that people go 2050, that's a long, long way off. And I mean, yeah, it is. But 2050, we'll be alive. Right. So it's not somebody else's problem, right? We're going to be alive on the planet.
Right.
Living with the consequences of whatever decisions are made.
Right.
And for me, it's tangible. My mom is 25, actually 26 years older than me. So it's what kind of world will we be living in when we're that equivalent age? It's personal. It's not somebody else's problem. It's ours.
Yeah.
And even 5 years off, 5 years, we can all 5 years, it's children getting to the point that they're running off from birth to preschool. It's a PhD for people who, gone through that process.
Right.
We've all done 5 years at something, and that's just between now and 2030.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. And so interesting that you said 25 years. We always say, oh, it's for the next generation. But hey, people are living longer. This is what will still be around when things don't work out, so we need to be prepared for that. So your work, is it just in Singapore? Do you also work within Malaysia as well?
Oh, absolutely. We work with Malaysia. My sister-in-law is Malaysian, so I have lots of good, close personal reasons to come up to Malaysia. So while we're headquartered in Singapore, and much appreciation for the support we get here, we work with leaders in Malaysia. Last year it was with several banks and energy conglomerates, and we also work with organizations that are in Thailand, Indonesia, and Australia.
Right.
And the practical pieces that people say, like, well, what is it? Is we help businesses map out what's a very practical roadmap to get to under 1.5 for their business that's successful for their business, their stakeholders, and their people.
Right.
Yeah, and that makes life a lot easier because instead of it being complex, it's, this is what I need to do next.
I see. And I know you work a lot with leaders and business owners in ASEAN in general and beyond, of course, to drive sustainability. So based on that experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that you hear that they face, and what advice would you give them and other leaders?
Okay. The biggest challenge I find that leaders here in ASEAN face is that it feels really complex, and particularly when they're concerned on the commercial side. It's like, do I need to do it now? And will the priorities shift? And my advice to leaders on this is we're all seeing and living with the impact of climate change already, with hotter days, hotter nights, with more intense storms and the damage that causes. So, as a wise man once said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best is today. So if you take action today as a business leader, what this does, it gives you the power of compounding in your favor. Because any action that's delayed only is going to become more costly, and there's only going to be more of it to clean up.
Okay. Now, I know that the book you wrote, Greensight, the Sustainability Guide for Company Directors, right? And it's aiming to help tackle the sustainability transition journey of senior and C-suite leaders. What do you think are some of the challenges and how this is not business as usual in their approach? And I'm saying this because I actually sit on the board and I'm like, we have so many things to look at, and now with this. So what needs to be looked at differently?
As a board member, I find the biggest shift for us to shift and move across is many boards have got very focused on, are we sustainable in the financials? Essentially on that as one dominant parameter. And what sustainability is saying is, great, now we have to be able to multitask and optimize across multiple parameters. And governance is fundamentally, good business governance. That's not a big stretch. It's just seeing it apply further. But we haven't had to think so deeply about the environment and the people sides. And it's realizing, oh, wait a second, we're smart people at board levels. We're used to dealing with multiple parameters. This is a larger set of parameters to take on. And I believe board members are completely capable of it, but it is a rewiring of our thinking.
Right.
Okay. And in the book, right, you've highlighted 5 specific types of sustainability profiles that assesses the ESG readiness of companies, and from there identify areas for improvement, right? Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about it and what kind of businesses actually fit in each profile?
Okay, so to take the 5, we find one profile is what we call the observer. These are companies that say, we don't think there's any business model implications and there's no demand from our stakeholders, so we don't think we need to do anything. Given some of the environmental changes and the regulatory changes that, even if it's not active in Asia, our customers in Europe and in in China and Japan and North Asia are all wanting. So it's like, it mightn't be our regulations, but it's global regulations that are affecting us. That's a high-risk position to be in. So, you can just sit on the sideline and say, we're observing.
Right.
The next one is ones who go like, okay, we've got some stakeholder interests. Let's get out there and make the pledges. So these are the companies that make these, we're doing a bit, so let's go and really over-market our sustainability efforts. They're the classical ones that expose themselves to greenwashing.
Right.
These are the companies that make pledges for net zero and don't actually put plans in place and action those plans. So it's nice words, not a lot of substance. So those are the pledgers. The compliers are those that are going like, okay, I can see that we need to stay in business. This is licensed to operate. It's commercially necessary because of this particular customer segment or market segment. We're going to do what's necessary to maintain our license to operate. So it's a compliance game. It's getting future fit. It's going, we might have regulations that are coming in 3 years. We're going to be ready for them, but we're going to do just enough to be ready.
Right.
Compliance. Compliance is great. You stay in the market, but it doesn't create additional advantage, because that's what everybody else who stays in the market has to do too. So it's kind of like washes out.
Right.
So so then the more sophisticated ones are those that are saying, okay, we're going to see this as a transformation game. We're going to have to change our business model to these new parameters. We're having to deal with our stakeholders in very different ways. There's cumulative demand from our stakeholders. We need to transform who we are and how we operate. And we see some big established companies that are taking on this position. And so the compliers will be aiming for something like a net zero goal, whereas a transformer would be aiming for something like a true zero goal, which is more sophisticated than going, you know what, it's not about creating damage and cleaning it up. It's just don't create the damage in the first place.
Right.
And then the fifth one is what we call the definers. And definers are organizations that are deliberately designing for circular economy now. That's yet a different business model and way of operating. So you call them super advanced transformers.
Right. And when I guess when you look at this book, right, what do you hope readers would take away from this book? And is it because, do you think everyone actually goes through the 5 stages, or are some people already at stage 5 where they're, nirvana? Do you think people, do you think people actually go through that whole journey?
Well, the reality is for many businesses, many start as observers because they're just going like, we've got plenty of other problems.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, now this is now front of mind. We need to start dealing with it. So what we find is that still is a very significant number of businesses in Asia are observers, but the smarter ones are going like, actually, we do see enough shift. We better get on the wagon. Right. In Singapore, they use the phrase, the train has left the station.
Okay.
And, it's like, get on, because the businesses who are in action are moving ahead. Right. So some just go, okay, now we've got what do I need to do to comply? So they're working out, what's my compliance thing? And at the Institute, we work with businesses with their roadmap, so they know this is what I need to do here, this is how I need to engage this part of the business. It makes it fast and clean as a complier. Some, from a values point of view, are already aiming for a transformer or definer because that fits their organization's strategy and their organization's values. So, if we look at, say, in this part of the world, because people often go like, can you give me some examples? Is this, who's real doing this one? I'm not going to name any of the observers because, like I said, lots of people start there and there's no shame in it. Right. It's risk if you stay in it at the moment. Just the other week, a company in Australia called an oil and gas company called Santos was taken to court by their shareholders, which from a director point of view is interesting to have your shareholders doing this, to say that they didn't have a proper basis for claiming they had a clear pathway to reach net zero by the date that they said, which was 2040. Wow. And that was misleading and deceptive conduct, and therefore a breach of laws. So, so the legal ante as senior leaders is also going up. Wow. So that's quite significant. The transformers, people often go like, well, who's really doing that at that level? So in Australia, companies like Woolworth are on the journey, Kao in Japan, Naver in Korea, just locally. Other people will know companies like Patagonia and Eileen Fisher, who are fashion, but showing that even in that industry, it's possible. And definers are rarer, but one example from this part of the world is a company called 𝗔𝗂𝗀, who's a juice company. And over the last decade, they've redesigned their entire operations and business model to not just go for true zero. They're aiming on regenerative, they're zero waste, they're lifting the quality of land with their business partners. Wow. And they frankly just see ESG as the winning formula for success. So there's living, breathing organizations doing this well.
I see. And as the day goes, there's like this constant influx of climate change news, and day by day, sustainability as a whole becomes more complex. So, and because of this, the landscape itself can be actually very tough. So what actually keeps you going, and what strategies do you use to stay positive throughout?
That is a deep question. I mean, I have my fears and my doubts, but at one level, I find what helps me stay in what is a complex, and it can be an emotionally demanding space to see in, because when you see all that data in the situation, it's like, oh, no, keep watching, is that I was actually one of the scientists when I was growing up that was visiting, and he was the next generation older than my father. And I was asking him about, life and things. And what he said to me was that when they first started the Green Revolution, this is back in the 60s, and that the goal there was to stop wars being fought for hunger. And it was just after the Korean War, so, it was something that was very meaningful in Asia. And they said they thought it was going to take 3 generations.
Right. And
by the time he was talking to me, which was pretty much 1 generation, because we've solved it. It's not a problem of production. We may have other issues. It's not production. It was going to be a 3-generation challenge. It took 1. And so, when it kind of gets tough and we get results that aren't necessarily the ones that we really want, I go back to that and I go, if it's possible to solve something that felt so impossible as feeding the world, to do that not in 3 but in 1 generation, I have faith that business leaders and people like yourselves in doing the work that you do to help others know and see possibility, it is entirely possible for us in our generation to make the change to a wholly new future.
Right. So Joanne, how can people get hold of you? Where can they get more information?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for asking. They can get hold of us at, firstly, me personally, on LinkedIn is very easy. The company is the ESG Institute. That is ESG Institute, Singapore. I'll send you the link so it's in for the show notes. We'd be delighted to help Malaysian leaders succeed. And we have a complimentary profile that business leaders can take. And if you would like to include that in the show notes, we'd be delighted so people can go and say, well, where are we at now? What's the next best step for us?
All right. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, you've all been watching The Shift Asia.